Kiara, 你好 and hello. Welcome to the Chiwi Journal podcast. I'm your host, Camille Yang. My guest today is Mona Sobhani. She's a distinguished cognitive neuroscientist, researcher, and accomplished author with a rich and diverse professional background spanning over 15 years. Her wide-ranging interests have led her to explore the intersections of science, technology, spirituality, and human behaviors. In today's episode, we talk about Mona's book, Proof of Spiritual Phenomena, our psychedelic and supernatural experience, and some key findings in parapsychology. Thank you for joining us on this enlightening journey with Mona. We hope you gained valuable insight into the relationship between science and spirituality. Hi, welcome Mona, and thanks to our mutual friend Tom Morgan's introduction. He introduced your books, and we also have a little group chat. We talk about spirituality, and yeah, so it's such a pleasure to have you on my show.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm really excited to have this conversation.
Yeah, I always want to interview someone who has a scientific background, but also into spirituality. Because I know sometimes this can be a very separate part. Because all my science
Yeah.
friends, they're very skeptical about spirituality. So I wonder what made you have this worldview transformation, and can you share some key moments or experience that triggered this transformation?
Yep. Yeah. So I was definitely one of those skeptical scientists. I mean they train you that way, you know. So I was very anti-spiritual actually and anti-religious because for multiple reasons, I think, but my parents came from Iran and there was, an overthrow of their non-religious government for the religious government, so which appended, the whole country
Mm.
and everything. So I think my family sort of, I mean, my mom was very spiritual, but I think a lot of my family just kind of turned anti-religion after that. So I grew up in that framework, and I was always very, interested in like coincidences and things like that, but not spirituality per se. But what happened was I basically had an existential crisis in a series of events that happened to me over the course of a few years. And
Mm.
one of them, it started with my cultural background. As I mentioned, I'm Persian, and in our culture is actually quite mystical if you go back thousands of years to the true Persian cultural heritage. It's very mystical,
Yeah,
Sufism and
sure.
Rumi and Hafez are two famous poets that we still read. I still have on my nightstand that are very mystical and talk about, like the forces of the universe. It's only in recent times that the culture's been co-opted by religion.
Mm.
So we have a very kind of mystical, spiritual background. And as I mentioned, my mother is spiritual, and
Mm.
so my grandmother, they did something called divination, which is using, you can use anything, but my grandmother used coffee grounds, which probably sounds weird to Americans, but it's not like American coffee. It's
Uh-huh.
this different kind of, it's like Turkish, Armenian, Greek, Middle Eastern coffee that you leave the grounds in the cup, it dries, it makes pictures. And then if you have somebody who's quote unquote intuitive, they can look into it and kind of tell you things about your life. And somebody taught my grandmother. And so she would do it for people, and she was very good. And my mom learned from her. And so my mom would do it at family parties and things like that. And everyone loved her readings. And of course, I was, when things are in your family, you don't really like pay attention to them at
Yeah,
all.
true.
So I didn't really pay attention to it. But when I was in grad school, I would go home on the weekends and my mom would make me coffee. And then she would just start reading my cup. And at first, I didn't really pay attention, but I started noticing over time that things that she said would come true. And sometimes it would be things that were private, like really, really private to my life that I wouldn't have told anyone. And then a lot of times they would be things in advance of it happening. And so I started taking notes when she would do these casual readings to keep track. And I just lived in cognitive dissonance because our mainstream scientific Western framework doesn't have any explanation for this kind of thing. There's no way that you could know anything in the future. And it was also symbolic, and science is very reductionist. We reduce everything to parts and like atoms and molecules, but the coffee was symbolic. Like my mom would say, there's a turtle in the cup, which indicates something is moving slowly. So it was symbolic. And so I really couldn't make sense of it with science. And then, so that was just kind of there. But then it was a few years where a few events happened that were really emotional. So one of them it was the death of someone I knew. And my mom had kept, she got all weird when she was doing her readings for like 6 weeks in advance of this event happening. She kept saying like, and she never had said anything like this before, like, I think you're going to get bad news. And like, she's like, I think really bad news. And she's like, I just want to warn
Yeah.
you. And I don't want to say what it is, because I don't want to, what if I'm wrong? So it started making me nervous. And I kept asking my friends, like, which one of you has bad news? I know somebody has bad news. Just tell. But so then 6 weeks later, we found out that one of the professors at USC, which is where I got my PhD, and I had graduated at this point, but I was still closely tied to USC. Actually, I was working there. So he was killed by one of the students, and it was somebody who had helped. He was, beloved in the program, wonderful professor. He had helped me with one of my experiments on my dissertation, and so it was, upsetting and shocking and like a horrible event that happened to our community. And so then when I found it out, I told my mom. She was like, "Yeah, it was a death." And she's like, "I'd never seen anything like it." She's like, "I didn't even know how to explain it." She's like, "It was just very violent and unusual." And so, which is what it was. And so that really shook me, because this was like a life or death thing, right? Like all of her other readings had just been like, don't lose money, or make sure you think about this carefully before you make a decision or something. But this was big. And so it scared me. It scared me, and it confused me, because I was like, science says that this is impossible. How is this possible? But I was very busy at the time with a new job, and dealing with the grief of that event. And so I just kind of ignored it. And then a few years later, something else happened too. So I had this relationship I was in, and my mom had said it was going to, it was positive. Like, she saw every aspect of it, embarrassingly, in the coffee, and would tell me every weekend. And then it ended. And I was already in an existential crisis at this point, because I had graduated with my PhD and I was in the workforce, and I was kind of hitting that, even though I was in my early 30s, but I was like, is this it? This is what we do forever? Go to work? And it felt meaningless to me. And I was like, what is the point of life? Like, that was the first time that question popped into my head. And so then, with all of these things happening at once, I felt, dealing with heartbreak, and I just felt like it was the first time I fell into like despair and hopelessness, and I didn't see the point of being alive. I wasn't suicidal, but I just really, like, I was like, logically, rationally, I was like, why do we do this? So that's where I was. And then I begin, I wasn't ready to like look at myself and the situation. So I focused on the coffee, and I was like, it became this interesting thing to me, because I was like, how could, maybe science is wrong? And so I got interested in it and started exploring. And I think because I was at such a, you know, they always say like you have to kind of be broken down, or there's like some beautiful quote that I cannot remember right now, but it's like you have to get whatever cracked for the light to come in.
Oh yeah, true.
Yeah, and that's what happened basically. So I would never have been open to these things at all before, but because I was in such a low place, and it was part of the story, part of the whole situation, I got interested in, I was like, well, what is divination, and what does symbolism, how does that play in? And maybe time doesn't work the way that we think that it does. I mean, what do we know? As a scientist, I know that we don't know a lot of things. So I got curious and launched this personal project, which then turned into the book. But it was essentially me just trying to find answers to these questions, these big questions of like, why are we here? What's the meaning of life? But through this avenue. So like, I started interviewing people who are extremely intuitive or psychic or whatever you want to call it. to understand their perspectives and their experiences. Then I interviewed scientists because then I thought I was going crazy because I was like, I nuts for entertaining any of this? You know, the common sense or mainstream view is that all of this is fraudulent or it's been researched and disproved was kind of my sense, or not researched at all or whatever. But I started looking into it, and yeah, it just led me on this whole crazy long journey of it opened the door to spirituality, which I think they're separate things. So that's how it started. I'll stop there so you can.
After reading your book, I was like so resonated because I'm also very skeptical. I grew up in an academic background families, so everybody is like, okay, you need to like learn the science, and I was a science student in high school as well. I also found this very interesting because my grandfather and my father, they all trained in an academic environment, but late in their life they start to turn to spirituality. I have found this change I couldn't understand. But back then, I was just
Hmm.
saying, why you start to look at this Chinese book like I Ching, so they can tell, okay, today you need to do what, and you need to avoid what based on your like 5 elements or some
Mhm.
destiny elements. So I thought, yeah, my grandfather turned mad because I thought, wow, how come this highly reputable scholar now become like so spiritual? Yeah, I couldn't understand. I think his death like kind of struck me because he kind of know since he's started his
Yeah.
things in his late life, so he starts to know. And also my dad, in his, I think he got probably like a middle age crisis, so he started to studying some Buddhism, and he also
Yeah.
gave me some like a worship things. So I couldn't understand. I said, okay, thank you, Daddy, but I don't. Yeah, but it's kind of
Yeah.
saved my life, or just a lot of a coincidence, like you mentioned in your books as well. So I start to feel like, interesting this part. Yeah, and also I had my existential crisis when I was working in finance. You earn
Mhm.
a lot of money, but you still not feel happy, and there's so many
Yeah.
mystical things happening around you. When you interview all these spiritual, mystical, and psychic, so what are the some findings you find is very profound, and you can share with my listeners?
Yeah. The most shocking thing initially was that a lot of my scientist colleagues were open minded. They were all. It turned out that they were more open minded than I was. It turned out I was actually one of the more closed minded, skeptical
Mhm.
people. Um, yeah, and so all of them, when we sat down to have conversations about this, I kind of asked them like, "Have you ever experienced anything that you can explain with science? Are you interested in paranormal, supernatural things? Do you think there's things that we can't measure with science and that kind of stuff?" And yeah, we had to like, I've known these people for over a decade, and we had some of the best conversations that we've ever had in our relationships, and during that project. And they all were just like, first of all, they all had stories. Every single one of them had a personal story of either themselves or someone they knew having some sort of, quote unquote anomalous thing happen to them that
Mm.
they just couldn't explain with science. And all of them were very like, well, there's a lot of things that we don't know in science, and we're supposed to be open-minded and curious. And if there's even one data point that, or if something happens just once, I think William James says this, if there's one white crow, then all crows are not black. Like
Hmm.
it just takes one instance of
Yeah, true.
something to make like a theory or a general statement not true. And yeah, in science, we're not supposed to ignore outliers because usually that data that doesn't fit the models usually what causes a paradigm shift or an update
Mm.
in a theory or a model. And so they're
Mm.
actually really important. But as scientists, we don't like them because they break our models,
Yeah.
and usually they're not what we're looking for. So yeah, so I just found that and by the end of the writing the book, I always say these are not anomalous experiences. They're human experiences, and everyone has them, or everyone's capable of having them. And I found that when I was talking to my scientist colleagues, I was
Uh-huh.
like, these are very normal. We just ignore them and kind of whisper them to each other because we're like embarrassed because of what Western mainstream culture to say anything, but that they're very common. And then with the intuitives, they were very interesting people. They were all very different. And what I found interesting about them was I thought, because when I would go in for readings with my friends. We made it this like fun thing. We live in Los Angeles. There's no shortage of psychics here.
Yeah.
So we would go in for readings, and I thought, and then they would start saying things about spirituality. Like they would say, this is a lesson, a soul lesson, or
Mm.
this person is part of your soul group, or this is from a past life, or things like that. And I was not familiar with with any spiritual frameworks pretty much at all,
Mm.
and definitely not the ones they were talking about. So it went over my head when
Yeah.
I would record them and write it down, but it didn't mean anything to me. So when I interviewed them, I would ask them about that, and like, where did you learn this spiritual framework? Did you grow, like when you grew up, is that what your family believed in, or did you go to psychic school? Like, is that what they teach you? Like, I literally had no idea. And most of them came from families that were not like that. One was like half Jewish, half Christian. Her parents didn't believe in anything anomalous. Like another one was like similar. She's like, oh no, my parents didn't believe in any of this. They weren't religious or spiritual. So then I would be like, that's interesting. So then, how
Mm-hmm.
did you get into this?
Yeah.
And they would just say, something that I would consider crazy at the time, where they'd be like, I don't know, I just knew, like, or my spirit guide told me, or I had a dream and I understood that this is how it is. And with certainty, which I was like in shock of, because I'm a scientist. I was like, what do you mean you just knew?
Yeah.
Like, can you just accept it? Like, I
Yeah.
didn't, I didn't understand at all.
Uh-huh.
But I just listened, and I was like, that's cool. And then multiple of them said that. So then at some point I just got used to hearing it. I was like, I guess this is just a thing. And none of them, at least not the ones I spoke to, I know that there are schools or classes and certifications that they can get, but some of them were certified. But they were like, I didn't learn my skills. Like they were, I've had them. I've always had them. I just learned how to use them. Maybe, from meditation classes, or working with other people who are intuitive. So I thought that was really interesting. They were very matter of fact about it. It was really, when I think back on it now, it's just kind of funny thinking of who I was at the time and the things that they were telling me. Like in the book, I
Yeah.
talk about one of them, just like one of the first interviews, she just starts telling me, she's like, I've seen fairies. And I was just staring at her like, what? What is
Yeah.
going on? But I just came to know them as people too, and they were very kind, especially at a time when I
Mm.
was very fragile. They kind of held me, so I never wanted to denigrate them or discount their experiences. And that was kind of probably what helped me open up a little bit to what they were saying, and just understand that these are humans and they have their own experiences. And as a neuroscientist, I know that we all perceive things and then we all make our own meaning. Like we create meaning in the stories in our lives, we create them. So, and that's not to say that what they experienced is not true. I believe that that is what they experienced and that is the meaning that they derived from it. So that's kind of how I tried to start approaching it. But it was definitely hard, um, coming from a very skeptical place to start. It was kind of like a crash course. It wasn't like a gentle entry
Yeah.
into spirituality.
Yeah. Are there any like specific moment like convinced you? Because it took me like at least 30 years, like from 30 years for me to convince. Okay, I think my shift would be like I accumulated so many interesting stories and I encountered a lot of supernatural things. Then okay, I start to okay, I'll accept that. Are there any like moments for you as well?
Yeah, I had a lot of moments. It did take me a while. Let me think for a second. Yeah, it took like maybe 3 years, I would
Mm-hmm.
say, to
Yeah.
become fully convinced. And there's two people that convinced me. And one of them is a really good friend of mine who's extremely intuitive, but I didn't even know he was until some of this started. And then another one is one of the intuitives that I don't know if I didn't interview her, but yeah, she's just one of the ones I came to know. The two of them together have have said things. You want a story?
Yeah, yeah, that would be great.
I'm trying to think. Okay, so I had a mentor who actually is the one who encouraged me or made me write this book. I had done all these interviews, I had all these notes. I didn't want to write a book, but he was like, "No, you got to write a book. You got all
Mm,
these notes." So he gave me a 2 week deadline. I wrote it. He helped me, pull it all together. Anyway, he that was in 2020, and then he passed away in 2021 from COVID at the end of the year, and in November. And then in December, I had my friend come over who, again, I didn't know he was this connected until he came over this
yeah.
night. This night. So it was December. I was hosting him and his husband. They came over, and then I had not told him that uh, my mentor had passed away.
Mm,
It had just happened, really, like, and I was still processing it. I think I wasn't like talking about it a lot, but he came over and he's like, I don't want to alarm you, but you have a male spirit here for you.
oh.
And then I was like, what? That is alarming. What are you
Yeah.
talking about? And then
Yeah.
I was kind of like, oh no, don't tell me. I don't want to know. Like, I get scared of these things. I don't want to know. But he was like, no, no, it's positive. He's like, and it's someone who knows you. He's like, did someone pass away recently?
Oh,
And I was just staring at him like, what
yeah.
the hell is going on? So then
Yes.
I told him, I was like, yeah, I mean, I guess, yes, my mentor passed away last month. And then he just started saying a lot of things really fast that only my mentor would know. And this was the craziest thing. So a lot of those things he said were private, but this was weird. So he said, so I didn't find out about his death until a week after
Mm,
it happened. And I was pretty upset about it. That no one got in touch with me. Like, how come I didn't find out? Why did I find out a week later? And then my friend, as when he was over for
mm,
dinner, he said, he's like, you're upset about, like, did you find out, like, after it happened, like way after or something? And I told him, I was like, yeah, I found out a week later. And he's like,
mm.
well, don't worry about that. That was supposed to happen that way. Because he's like, were you doing something with your book that week? And I just stared at him because I had edits. I was doing the rounds of edits on my book, and I had edits that literally, I think I
Oh.
received them the like day before he died, and then they were due a week later. And so when I turned the edits in, that's the day I found out he died. And so he's like, "Well, did you have something to do with your book?" And I was like, yeah, I guess I had edits due. He's like, that's why you didn't find out for a week. They I don't know, whatever, the universe arranged it that way so that
Uh-huh.
you wouldn't be distracted. So anyway, when it's like, and I've had a million moments like that with him, of things that there's no way that he would know. I didn't talk to anyone about that. My 1 week, my like edits, my it was so crazy. I didn't even think about it. So I've had a million moments like that with him, and with that other intuitive, like things that there's no way that they, very specific things like that, with timing, with the person they're talking about, the messages they give, that you're just kind of like, these are either the most accurate, wild, coincidental guesses,
Yeah.
or there's something going on. Yeah.
Yeah, true. I think I had one totally shocked me. I think last year, December last year, I have a friend and her girlfriend is a psyche, but I never took her seriously because psyche, whatever. And she called me, my best friend's girlfriend called me and said, "Oh, you need to pay attention to a redhead Irish." I said, "What? I haven't never encountered any Irish people in my life, not to mention redhead Irish." And I think just after that call, then 2 days or 3 days later, there's an intern joined my company, and he's a
Oh,
redhead Irish. what the hell? I think that's the
Oh my
moment.
gosh.
Yeah, because before is also there's some like coincidence happens a lot. And I say, okay,
Mhm.
okay, whatever. But this one was like,
Yes.
wow, because my friends, they all live
Yeah.
in New Zealand and they have no idea like what's my life in
Right.
Europe now, and my company is in New York. So it's all this such a coincidence. I just couldn't believe it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, it's those ones
yeah,
that really kind of
scary
shock
and
you.
yeah,
Yeah, they are kind of scary.
like how come
They
you know? Because I have this vision, blah blah. It's like, oh wow.
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, I know. It took me a while to get used to it, but now I'm more used to it. But they're kind of, once you get over this scary part, though, they're kind of exciting. You're like, whoa, reality is way more interesting than I thought it was.
True. Yeah. You mentioned the parapsychology phenomenon in your book. I didn't quite get it. Would you mind elaborate about that and all the extensive researches you done on this part?
The research. Yeah. So I actually assumed at the beginning of this project that there hadn't been any like lab research done on I guess the field is called parapsychology. Now they call it psi
Seriously.
research,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
PSI. And I thought there wasn't any research because I was like, I don't know anyone who does this research. I've never heard anything about
Yeah.
it. But then when I started doing interviews, um, just for my own personal project, I came across there was this institute called the Windbridge Institute or Research Center, and they actually did quintuple blinded studies with mediums, and they had a whole protocol, they had a whole center, they certified like 19 of them, they tested them, they had this whole like testing protocol, and they had published scientific papers. So
Mm.
I spoke to the guy and I read their papers, like one of the co-founders, and he gave me this huge reading list. He's like, there's been like over 100 years of
Mm.
research done on this at Duke, at Princeton, at UCLA, at Berkeley, like at big, universities. And he's like, I'll give you a reading list. So he gave me the list and I dug in and I found out that he was right. And then I think
Okay.
that was in 2020. And then so 2 years prior in 2018, there had been a
Yeah.
review of the meta analyses published. So in science, that means a review is like when you review all of the evidence in a field. And a meta analysis is similar, except it's more technical. So you like pull all of the studies together and you look at the statistics and you kind of try to determine the effect size of the effect you're looking for. So there had been one published that reviewed like all this like 100 years of research,
Wow. Okay.
and yeah, and it determined, it was like there is an effect here, and it was, I don't remember the number anymore, sorry, I should like know this, I wrote it in the book, but I remember that I remember there were different kinds of phenomena, and I can talk about them if you want, but some of them,
Mm.
and so there was a range in effect size. But what shocked me was that the effect sizes were, which means like the higher the effect size, the stronger the effect. Like if it's a really weak effect size, then it's hard to
Mm.
detect it. So it's like
Mm.
if you're trying to find it in a population, it'll be harder to find. So what was interesting was some of the effect sizes were comparable to like the what we find in neuroscience research and in psychology research, and definitely in clinical
Mm.
research. Like I think clinical medicine, they have to, it has to be a certain percent efficacy, to, and so when I compared it, I went in the literature to compare it to like diabetes medicine, antidepressants, and it was like comparable to those. And so I was shocked. And then also the methods, like, a lot of times people won't even read those papers and they'll say, oh, they're faulty,
Okay.
bad scientific designs. But because they've been so scrutinized, there's been all this work into making them airtight. So a lot of their designs were actually way better than normal neuroscience or psychology because we don't have the same scrutiny. So when I dug through all of that, I was shocked. I mean, I was like, this is crazy. Like this is really good evidence. And it's insane to me that anybody would discount this. It's as good as anything. It's as good as other neuroscience and psychology findings. So after that, I thought, all right, well, there's scientific evidence for it.
Yeah, I know the psychedelics is has an influence on mental illness, especially PTSD. But still, in the mainstream society, they still not accept that. Although this has like 1,000 years history, and recent studies also very focused on it. Can you explain why and what stops the mainstream to accept that?
It's a long history with psychedelics. Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of damage was done in the 70s, and it's a whole political thing,
Mm,
um, really. But, and I think actually, Jules Evans writes a really great, he runs something called the Challenging Psychedelics Project, and he has a great newsletter that used to be called the Challenging Psychedelics Project. I think it's called Ecstatic Integration now. But he talks about this, about the difficult relationship between psychedelics and Western culture, because Western culture has a problem with ecstatic experiences, or
mm.
like experiences of like pure joy and mystical and spiritual experiences, right? Like the whole Western ethos is work hard, be productive, don't waste time, be serious. Like, and so it has a hard time understanding these ecstatic states, which psychedelics would be considered one of those where, and to be honest, that's the perception I had. I remember when
Mm,
I was turning to look at psychedelics in this journey, I thought, that's so weird. Who even cares about psychedelics? Aren't they just hallucinogens? Like, I didn't know. And so then I went to read the literature, and then I was shocked again to find that I was like, wow, first of all, they're very healing. Apparently, they were studied from the 1950s to the 70s before they were outlawed by psychiatrists. Psychiatrists used them to get patients' conscious minds out of the way so patients could more easily see their own behavioral patterns and problems and resolve them. And I was
mm,
like, what? This is nuts. Like a hallucinogenic does that, you know? So then I found all that research. And then, of course, the modern day research, all the with MDMA for PTSD, psilocybin for depression, and they're just continuing that tradition. But, and it's a shame, we've lost so many years of research. We could have been way far more advanced in our understanding of them, but we're, trying to catch up.
mhm,
So, yeah, I think the reason, of course, is political. Like, yeah, in the US, it was Nixon and his drug war and they suppressing the anti war movement, all of that. But I think also, as I said, Jules Evans does a nice job of talking about how, in general, Western culture kind of has a problem chilling out
mm.
and like enjoying joy,
Yeah.
right? Like it has a difficult relationship, I think, with ecstatic experiences. So I think that's definitely part of it, and I think that because now we don't necessarily have the same political climate, right? We see actually the opposite. We see a lot of states decriminalizing or legalizing access to psychedelics. I mean, I went to the psychedelic science, the MAPS conference this summer, and Rick Perry, conservative governor Rick Perry, was on stage talking about supporting them. So,
Oh,
I think I think that's changed, but I
yeah.
think that the culture in general still has an uneasy relationship. And I also get it because psychedelics are it takes a lot of courage to do them because you don't
Mm.
know what you're going to get.
Yeah, exactly. Can you share some your personal experience with psychedelic, like some most
Yeah,
profound experience or highlights from your trips?
sure. I will say as a neuroscientist, so I've tried a few things, but I did LSD once, and it was what blew me away was the. I always describe it like this. It's like you're living in 2D, and then you take a psychedelic, and suddenly you're in 3D.
Yeah,
And
true.
so suddenly, like you feel, right? You
Yeah.
feel so much more strongly. So you feel like all of these emotions that you normally suppress or that are normally muted, right? Usually the volume is turned down on our emotions. And suddenly, yeah, they're turned way up and you're like, wow, I didn't know I could
Yeah.
feel that deeply, And it's a wide range, right? If you're listening to music, your emotions can change like that as the music changes. And so it's just this beautiful experience of like coming into your body suddenly and your mind, and like seeing
Yeah.
the relationship between your mind, your body, and your environment in a totally new way, and coming to appreciate it. That was my first. No, actually, that wasn't my first experience, but that was my first like really profound experience. And then I think wait, what year is it? Yeah, last year, 2022, I tried 5 methoxy DMT, 5-MeO DMT. Um,
Yeah.
and that one was life changing. I mean, in so many ways, I had the complete ego death, complete dissolution, and I became the entire universe, all of space and time,
Oh wow.
all at once. I was every piece, atom, molecule of the universe all at once. And and then I also had a near death experience though in it. And so it was one of those experiences that you would consider a challenging psychedelic. The near death experience is kind of challenging, but they also, that's why I love some of the mystical or esoteric traditions. I like look to those now because they talk about, it's like an initiation, right? And it's death and rebirth. And
Mm.
it's, they kind of say when you die, before you die, like it helps you because and so I felt like I came back from that trip, when I thought I died in the trip, the only thing I thought of was, oh my god, I didn't get to say goodbye. Sorry, I'm getting emotional.
No problem. That's
But
good.
I was like,
Thanks for sharing.
I didn't get to say goodbye to the people I love.
Yeah.
So when I came back, it was just a realization, like I didn't think about money, I didn't think about
Mm.
accomplishments, I didn't think
True.
about a single one of my possessions. The only thing I thought about were the people in my life and how I didn't get to say goodbye. So it was, yeah, and I just came back also just really glad to be alive.
Exactly.
So yeah, so and I think so again, like coming experiencing that on a personal level was just very evolutionary. But I think also from a neuroscience perspective, like again, it's like, and that
Mm.
one was actually like stepping into 5D. Honestly, 5-MeO was like 5D. It was like
Yeah.
a whole new level of understanding of existence and of our universe. It was a very very intense thing. So, obviously it's not for everyone.
Yeah.
And that's why I say it takes courage because you don't know what you're going to get. I know I had friends, other neuroscientists who did 5-MeO, and their experience was all love and like white light. And, I was like, how nice for you. Meanwhile, I died in mine. But like, it's different for everyone. You don't know what you're going to get.
Yeah.
So, but I think the evidence also suggests that they're very useful
Mm.
clinically, and I also think personally they're great personal development tools.
Yeah. I think I had two psychedelic experience, like with the plant, ayahuasca and San Pedro
Mm, I haven't
last
done
year.
those.
Yeah, November last year, I also have the near death experience with ayahuasca, and I also saw my parents there because I haven't seen them almost 3 or 4 years since the pandemic. Because they are living in China,
Mm-hmm.
so the Chinese government shut
Yeah.
the border. So I saw them
Oh, that's right.
in my trip because before I was like, okay, because I always live overseas and we were not that close. But during my trip, I feel like super emotional. Then I book my tickets and fly back to China
Oh,
as soon as the China opens the border.
oh, that's
The
lovely.
medicine just gave you some interesting thing you never thought about, or you kind of surprise this
Mhm.
emotion.
Definitely. Yeah, I think we suppress a lot. We're taught to suppress a lot. So yeah, a lot comes up.
Yeah, exactly. Because I thought, oh, I'm strong, I'm independent. I don't need my parents support me. I'm happily living overseas by myself, but
Right.
not exactly in that you see. Yeah,
Yeah.
and also for my like 2 years ago, I had a Pedro. It's also like a ayahuasca, like a
Yeah.
cactus plant, and I saw my previous life. It's like so vivid. Yeah, it's like so many
Wow.
different clips, like movie And
Oh my gosh, that's so cool.
yeah, and I thought, because before I never believe in like reincarnation or like past life
Right.
regression. So I kind of want to listen to your opinion about this part, like karma and past life regression. What's your thoughts from a scientific perspective?
Yeah. Yeah. So, oh yeah, I didn't tell that part of the story, but so after, but actually, yeah, before I started doing the personal journey, I was going to get readings with my friends for
Mm-hmm.
fun, and then I heard this podcast episode with Chelsea Handler,
Yeah.
and she was interviewing Laura Lynn Jackson, who's a psychic medium, and Chelsea Handler at the time was a skeptic, or whatever.
Mm.
I've been a fan for a long time, and she's always been a skeptic. But anyway, she had Laura Lynn Jackson on, and this podcast episode, like changed my life. It's so funny because at that point I was not listening to anything spiritual, reading anything spiritual. I wasn't interested. But Laura Lynn Jackson starts talking about that, the spiritual framework. It's like, oh, it's, we reincarnate, we come back in soul groups to learn lessons and whatever. And so I kind of listened and I thought, how interesting. That's what
Yeah.
the psychics I went to said. And then they mentioned this book, Many Lives, Many Masters by Brian Weiss,
Mm.
who's a psychiatrist who, it was a case study about that, like past life regression. So I ordered the
Yeah.
book, and that was the book that changed, that kind of got me interested in all of this, because he was like a Yale and Columbia educated psychiatrist, like atheist,
Mm.
didn't believe in any of this stuff, but he had this patient that he starts healing with past life regression, which means he just puts her into hypnosis regression. She starts retelling her past lives, and then usually something from that life was traumatic, like drowning, let's say, to death. And then she kind of relives it in the hypnosis. And then when she comes back, one of her problems in this life is resolved. Like she had a fear of swimming or something.
Yeah.
And he had been trying to treat her for a year and a half and nothing had worked. And then suddenly this started working. So he was like, well, I don't know what this is, but I guess we'll just keep going. And one by one, her like anxiety got better and
Mm-hmm.
whatever. Like she was a mess. She couldn't leave her house, or I don't remember the story exactly, but anyway, he ends up curing her. So I started digging into all the literature. I was like, well, maybe it's just this one guy, or what is this? This is so out. It was so far out there for me because I
Mm.
was not familiar with anything at that point. Um, but I read, there were a few psychiatrists and behavioral health practitioners from like the 60s, 70s, 80s, who stumbled across this in their practice, like Brian Weiss, and
Mm.
they stayed curious and explored it, and then ended up doing this with thousands of patients, and they found that it works to heal people both emotionally and
Mm.
physically. And this, it does seem to be, that's the story that everyone tells when you put them in a regressed state and kind of ask them, like if they're between lives or whatnot, if you ask them for what's going on, apparently all these thousands of people reported the same thing, saying, oh, I'm with my spirit guides, we're choosing my life, this was my lesson in the last one, like things like that. And so yeah, so I read all those books, and I still have a hard time understanding it, but I mean, I'm open to it. I think
Yeah.
also there was a lot of literature from, where is it, University of Virginia, looking at kids between the ages of 2 to 5 years
Yeah.
old who have these past life memories. So there was like 2,000 or 3,000 of them now they've
Mm.
interviewed there. And then they go to try to verify that life. Like they'll get enough details, and they have all these surveys and they publish papers. So I mean, honestly, I think there's like some evidence for it. Like unless there might be another story or
Mm.
theory that we're missing. And the truth is that we don't have physics figured out yet. Like we can't reconcile regular physics with quantum physics.
Mm.
So who knows, when we figure some of that stuff out, maybe some of this other, spiritual, quote unquote, anomalous data will make more sense. But I don't care that much anymore. I think it's probably true. I
Yeah.
think there's enough anecdotal
Evidence.
evidence
Yeah.
from, yeah. So it's interesting.
Yeah, when I visited Tibet, they are like they have Tibetan Buddhism. They full like all in to believe the reincarnation because they select
Mm,
the Dalai Lama based on that.
that's right.
all
That's
these
right.
children,
Yeah.
because it's already like a thousand years history. So each child they select, they could remember the previous Dalai Lama taught them, like such a young age, and they can recite so all
Mm.
this Buddhism context and
That's
yeah, speaking
amazing. Yeah.
interesting language. So it's interesting. It's like 2 days ago, my Brazilian friend, he told me his daughter can speak Japanese in very young age, and he has no idea what's going on because her daughter was so young, like 2 or 3 years old, they
Oh,
can speak
wow.
Japanese. He doesn't understand. I think yeah, he also share a lot of supernatural thing.
Wow, that's
He wants
fascinating.
to do
Yeah.
the psychedelic trip to explain all his questions. Yeah, so he share a lot of like private things about his supernatural encounters. I find this wow fascinating.
I love those. I love those stories now.
Yeah, because before I was just like, but now I said, yeah, tell me more. I want to know more.
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, and I think that there's especially another near death experiencers. Like if you listen to their stories, those are really interesting too, and they report very similar things
Mm-hmm.
to what people report from past life regressions and also from the reincarnation, like the kids that report that. So it's just interesting because a lot of these people don't come from cultures that believe in reincarnation. They like have no knowledge beforehand, especially the kids, right? They're just like 2 years
Yeah.
old. They don't, if they're growing up in a Christian household suddenly. Yeah. So yeah, I think there's quite a bit of evidence, enough to say that we probably don't have the whole picture.
Are there any practical things you can share with people, like if they want to learn more about spirituality or just let them be open heart, such as like a meditation or something? Yeah, you can
Uh,
recommend people to try to start with.
let's see. Yeah, I mean, meditation is good, but it's so over recommended. What I love that I've tried that is not as difficult as psychedelics,
Mm-hmm.
but is a step up from meditation is breath work.
Yeah.
So something like holotropic breath work, or there's another kind called like neurotropic. I mean, whatever. I'm sure there's a lot of different variations, but breathwork is another way to get yourself into an
Mm-hmm.
altered state of consciousness. And it's actually, if you do it in a group, like you can have really powerful sessions, very similar to psychedelics. And it gets you to that place where you can release emotions. And a lot of people have reported, like if you read any of Stan Groff's work, a lot of people have reported seeing past lives or releasing things like that. So I think breath work is really great because it not only gets you in touch with your body and your emotions, but if you're lucky enough, like to have or see
Yeah.
something, you might get in touch with a part of like have a spiritual mystical experience too. So I really like breath work. Obviously, since I did this so much, I really like getting readings. Like it's also the easiest way to for you to not do anything. Like you don't have to
Mm-hmm.
meditate,
Yes.
you don't have to take the psychedelic. All
Yeah.
you have to do is show up
Yeah. No
and
risk.
yeah, no risk. And if you don't like what you heard, throw it away.
Yep.
But yeah, like it's kind of fun just to see, you know, what's,
True.
you
Yeah.
know, lose an hour of your time.
Yeah, I had a voice activation session with a Japanese monk last month. So
Hmm.
this monk he's doing the chanting with a beatbox. So he kind of
Oh,
remixed the modern technology with some old tradition.
very
So I,
clever.
I did that yeah, voice activation with him, and it's also involved with meditation and breath work.
Hmm.
And I was like so shocked because I was not on drug, but I saw the perfect fractal patterns
Yes.
and
Yes.
geometry. Like only if I'm on LSD, I will see it. But with
Yeah.
that breath working and meditation, I saw it. I said, wow, that's
Yeah.
interesting.
So actually, there's a lot of, so one thing I'll say too, as a neuroscientist, like we don't have a lot of research into like sound and light and how
Hmm.
it affects your
Yeah.
consciousness, but it's starting to be done. And for example, I have some new friends, but friends at the Institute for Advanced Consciousness Studies here in Santa Monica. And they're doing some of that. They're looking at different technologies,
Mm.
like these light and sound
Yeah, yeah.
experiences and how they affect your consciousness. And they're actually going to, well, they're trying to raise money for it
Okay.
to do an ultrasound study to stimulate the pineal gland, because no one apparently has actually studied the pineal gland in humans that like much. So yeah, just kind of trying to see it, test that hypothesis, which is floating around the spiritual world, but no one has ever tested. So I think that there's a lot of potential there for like light and sound and altering consciousness, and it's interesting.
True. What other direction you see in this science world they will lead to like more involved with the spirituality?
It's a good question. I mean, I think psychedelics is probably leading the way there, but I
Mm.
think all what I just mentioned, the light and sound, like explore that kind of exploration, because also what the psychedelics have done is propelled a, a kind of race for how do we get the psychedelic state and the benefits without the psychedelic. So then that's why you see like some of these technologies like light and sound things
Yeah.
like picking up. um but and I think that that's mainstream. I mean, and I know there's a lot of research like at the Institute for Noetic Sciences where they're doing more, they're much more, they're not mainstream, they're much more open-minded, like they'll study
Mm-hmm.
anything.
Yeah.
So not anything, I mean, they're very smart, they're like they're research is very good,
Yeah.
but yeah, they're more into like let's study energy healers, like no one studies them, like let's, see if we can measure the change in the room, like the temperature, the pH, the whatever quantum stuff that's going on. And if everything is
Mm.
interconnected, which everything is, like systems science tells us, right? Then when you change, everything around you changes. So one thing that I always think about when I'm reading a lot of these studies, or that we were always missing in normal science, is that is kind of like the environment and how that's changing. So I think there's a lot of really interest. I'm trying to think if there were other, I don't know why my brain is drawing a blank. I'm sure there are other institutes that I cannot remember at the moment, that are doing like innovative research, but maybe I'll send you some
Mm-hmm.
links later.
Yeah, sure, no problem. And also, I found it's very interesting because I always feel the divided between the East and the Western culture. Because in Chinese culture, this kind of fortune teller things is very common, and people like to worship those spiritual
Oh,
things. Yeah, but in Western world, I do feel like people are more rational, not yeah, to say this. So, what's your opinion on that? And also, you have this mixed culture, the Persian and American
yeah.
culture. So, what's your opinion on that?
Yeah, I think it's so hard for me to gauge. I mean, I do think mainstream, like Western culture, is very and like rationalist. I mean, they use that word woo woo
Mm,
to
yeah,
to discount
true. Yeah.
anything. And I've been trying to get people to realize I feel like that word is slightly racist
Mm.
because it's like, what do they usually say it about? It's
Yeah.
like it's
Woo-woo, yeah.
usually something that's not Western.
Uh-huh.
And so I don't know. Yeah, I think that there's a lot of, and it's part of it is just their ignorance. Like they just don't know. You don't know what you don't
Mm-hmm.
know.
True.
But yeah, I do think I think that when you go down to the individual level, and I included some of the stats in my book, but I think it was like 25% of the
Mm.
population in the US believes in reincarnation. I think more people than ever have reported having spiritual awakenings or experiences in the US and in the UK, probably everywhere in the world. And we have people we're doing more and more meditation, and people are doing psychedelics now. So I think we're going to have a lot more of
Mm.
that. So I think that actually we're probably going to start to see a shift. But I also think with that shift will come some conflict because, the old versus the new, which usually happens. But yeah, I think it can be tricky. I don't know, like as a scientist being interested in this stuff, I always think about how to talk about it. And it takes a little bit of intuition to feel out who you're talking to and how to talk about it. But at the end of the day, I don't think they're two things. I don't think science and spirituality are two things. I think they're
Mm-hmm.
one. I think it's
Yeah.
one universe. So I think that we just
True.
haven't figured out. the missing link or the right language to bridge them. But yeah, I just play the game and pretend they're separate for now and talk about it separately, but they're not.
Yeah.
I'm sure it's the same thing.
I see. Yeah. One of my friends, she used to be an entrepreneur and very rational, but then she turns into a spirituality, and she kind of like an influencer in China, and she spread the word of spirituality. But so many mainstream media criticize as her as like a cult leader.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, because this is kind of like reminds me back to the 1970s. In America, there are so many people on drugs and like so liberal, and so many cults
Yes.
also emerging. So there's always some bad
Yeah.
apples there, like using people's
Oh,
vulnerability.
yeah.
So what's your advice for the people who wants to enter the spirituality world but not be scammed by those people?
Yeah, I mean, it's always a risk. I think that especially with something like spirituality, sometimes you turn to it when you're in a vulnerable position.
Mm,
And I think psychedelics make you particularly vulnerable to, changing ideas or flipping worldviews. So it is a
yeah.
very, very delicate thing. I think that I would say part of what actually I was going to say this about the science of spirituality, but it kind of ties in here too,
Oh,
is to use is to recognize the left and right brain. I know Tom loves this, our
yeah,
mutual friend
yeah.
Tom.
True.
but I think you also find a lot of this in the esoteric and spiritual literatures of like yin and yang, right? Like rational
Yeah.
and intuitive, using both. So, and that's another thing, like too, when people go to get readings, you should never hand over your power to somebody
Mm,
and think that what they say is true. You always have, you and your life best, right? Like you always have to check it against your
true.
own intuition. So I think there's a lot of that, like,
Hmm.
and with the same with spirituality, like I could never personally, I just could not have opened to spirituality without some science. That was just the way it was for me. So I needed findings, like I needed a scientific publication in my hand to say like some evidence, something. And so I think that helps too, and that's why I think actually it's important to start bridging them,
Mm,
because
true.
then you can't have people making wild claims. um, but the problem is right now there's not a lot of research money,
Mm,
there's not a lot of people trying to seriously study the bridging of these two things. They're just like, no, that's woo woo, I
mm.
won't touch it, I'll ruin my
Yeah.
career. And it's like, great that the rest of us have to suffer by not having any research findings.
True. Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I hope that changes. I will see. I think we're probably a few years, no, more than
Mm,
that. I think we're a little whiles away from that. I do think psychedelics is starting to shift that a little
mm.
bit, because you see psychedelic and consciousness centers
Yeah.
opening up at big universities. But we'll see what happens. But yeah, if I had one plea to make, it's like, yeah, if you have money to burn, you should probably find some people doing interesting research and encourage
Yeah.
it.
So, what do you hope readers and listeners take away from your book? Because your book kind of also gave me a confidence and affirmation to say, okay, science and spirituality can be merged together. They are together.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. I
mhm.
That's what I was hoping.
Uh-huh. That's
That's what I
good.
was hoping would happen.
Yeah.
So, my journey was really, really hard for me. It was like, first I had an existential crisis,
Mm,
then I had an identity crisis. I'm still going through integrating all of it. It's a really long, difficult journey, but it's worth it. And I think the book was the first step in saying, first of all, like, why should you care about spirituality? Because I never cared. It really is valuable.
mm,
It's like it's almost like if I go back in time to tell my previous self, like, you won't believe it, but it'll actually help your life. Like, you won't believe it, but your day-to-day life will actually get so much easier,
mm.
because yeah, you learn this way of reframing things, right? Like for
Yeah.
me, this simple exercise of, okay, well, what we don't really know, what this universe is and what reality is. And I don't care what any scientist says, since I am one. I know they don't know anything. So, what if we do reincarnate, and what if I am learning lessons? Then, instead of every difficult situation in my life, I can ask myself, what am I supposed to be learning here? And that helps me anyway, significantly, to not be like just a victim and just being like, God, this sucks. Like, why can't this person see my point of
Mm.
view, or whatever, like flipping the script and reframing the narrative in your head, which I got from spirituality, helped me a lot. And then also that, I guess, emphasizing or highlighting that these are human experiences. Like I talk about in the book, a lot of my scientist colleagues have had them. I mean, since the book, I found whole communities. Well, first of all, I founded one with a fellow neuroscientist,
Nice.
with a bunch
Yeah.
of other neuroscientists who have had or are interested in these experiences. And there's an even bigger one that we joined with like 600
Oh,
physicians and
okay.
scholars and scientists who've all had
Wow.
emergent experiences, what they call it. And so these are common. It's just that no one talks about them. And I feel like, I guess I'm a little bit rebellious. So it's, when I came into this and I was like, why doesn't anyone talk about this? Then it's
Mm-hmm.
kind of like, we should just talk
Mm-hmm.
about it. I don't care that it makes people uncomfortable. I don't care that you don't believe in it. Like, there's you know there's evidence, and not that we have to shove it in anyone's face or anything, but I think, yeah, it was like I was looking for permission. I finally realized that, in the journey, it was like I keep having these interviews with people because I'm looking for permission from another scientist to basically tell me it's okay for you to believe in something, and then to find evidence for it. And so I wrote the book to give that to other people.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's good. Yeah. Thanks to Tom. He introduced your book to me. So I said, yeah, that's good. Now I can also spread the word to my fellow skeptical science
Yeah.
focused friends.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think being skeptical is fine. I think I don't like the word skeptical
Mm,
anymore. I think you want to be discerning, right? You want to discern what is valuable and what
true.
is good research and
Yeah.
what is not, and what makes sense for you and what is not. So yeah, I think that that's a better way probably to approach all of this.
Exactly. So last question, can you tell me some upcoming projects or area you are working on or you're currently passionate about?
Yeah. Well, I do write as I mentioned, a psychedelics and altered states newsletter, which I still really enjoy
Mm,
doing. So I am doing that.
nice.
But actually, right on topic. So every year we have a big neuroscience conference. It's the Society for Neuroscience has a conference. Last year we did a neuroscience and spirituality social, and 50 scientists showed up. I thought no one was going to come. I was like, no one's going to come to this, but 50 scientists
That's
showed up,
good.
and
Yeah.
like the room was overflowing.
Wow.
And so they wanted to stay in touch. We started a group. We have a website. This year we wanted to do it bigger because we're like, wow, a lot of people are interested in this.
Yeah.
Like, we should do something bigger this year. So we decided to do, basically, consciousness is, we didn't talk a lot about that, but consciousness is one of the hard things that you can study in neuroscience, but
Mm-hmm.
it used to be controversial. um, like, they used to tell you,
Oh God.
don't study consciousness, it'll ruin your career. But now it's a little more open, but it's still, look, we just had a recent controversy actually last week, where one group of scientists called another group with a different theory,
Mm.
they called their theory pseudoscience, even though it's
Oh
one of the
wow.
leading theories in neuroscience about consciousness. Okay, anyway, so we were like, we need to have a panel, and we're going to talk about alternative models of consciousness. And so that's what we're doing this year.
Mm.
And we're actually raising money for it because it's so expensive to like have the room and the food and like and all that. But and I'll send you the link if you want to help spread the word.
Yes. Yeah.
Um,
Sure. For
but we
sure.
just
Yeah.
got yeah, like some of the we just got one of the biggest neuroscientists who leads one of the leading theories, Christoph Koch, to agree to come, and Donald Hoffman, he's from UC
Ah,
Irvine.
don't hope.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he talks
Mm-hmm.
about the evolutionary. Yeah,
Reality.
exactly.
Yeah.
Jonathan Schooler and Julia Mossbridge, who also has, they talk about quantum fields, and he talks about electromagnetic fields theories of consciousness. So yeah, so we're putting this together to be like, we need innovative ideas, we need open minds, and we need conversation, because science has become a little bit like clicky and a little bit like, you know, it's like they, with their disapproving stares and kind of quiet like condescension, discourage, I think, conversation in the field, especially in young neuroscientists. And I think
Very
that they need to
important.
see some innovation and some open minds, but you don't
Yeah.
see a lot of that in science anymore, unfortunately.
Yeah, for sure. Wow, that's exciting. Are you guys going to like live streaming, or is it more close to in real
It's a
life meetup?
public event. So if you're in
Uh-huh.
Washington, D.C. on November 11th, and I'll send you all the info, or I have to put it on my website, but
Yeah.
it's public. You can come. It's not at the actual conference, it's at the satellite or whatever, at the hotel. And we are going to record it. I don't know if it'll be live
Yeah.
streamed. We haven't figured that out yet. But yeah, we're definitely planning on recording it.
That's gonna be a great conversation to listen to with all these big
Yeah.
names. Yeah. Nice.
Yes, we're excited. And then we're also working on like putting together science and spirituality retreats. We did two last year,
Okay.
or I'm sorry, this year.
Yeah.
We're still in 2023.
Yeah.
We did two this year, and we're planning one for next year. And it'll be a space where we can present some of the science findings, but then also have people come, experience. Like you were asking, like, what's a good way? Like, we could have a light sound experience, or they can get readings, or we could do energy classes or something. Oh, something just happened.
Oh,
I don't
is
know.
that angel coming out?
I don't know. I thought it was an earthquake, but
Oh,
nothing is
no.
moving.
Wow. Okay, thank you so much for your time. Very nice to have you and chat about your book and your experience.
Thank you so much for having me. This was really fun.